Good morning, good afternoon, depending where we find you today. We're going to get going here. So this is the Canadian National Building Infrastructure, Indigenous Infrastructure Projects webinar, hosted by the C2C2C Unity Foundation. And the theme for this webinar is Indigenous leadership as a project starting point. And so my name is Jessica Vandenberg. I'm from the Deneta Nation and a 60 Scoop survivor. I'm also with the University of Alberta at this point as an industrial professor and assistant dean of outreach. And I will be your facilitator for today. And so from my heart and spirit to yours, I welcome all of you in a good way. This is the second webinar in our C2C2C Unity Foundation quarterly webinar series, and it's generously sponsored by our premier partner, the Brandt Group of Companies. And so the C2C2C Unity Foundation is a cross-partisan not-for-profit champion that works towards integrating the northern corridors to connect Indigenous communities and Canadians from sea to sea to sea. We are hoping to foster social development, sustainable economy, as well as good relations with Indigenous communities on the path to truth and reconciliation. And we see good things coming out of this National Unity Corridor. I'd like to start with a bit of a land acknowledgement. And so it's always a great honor to be asked to acknowledge the land that we stand upon and the peoples of this land. And today finds me situated on the traditional territory of Treaty 6. And I stand upon a land that carries the hearts and footsteps of many First Nations, Métis and Inuit people that have been here for thousands of years and many generations. And I'd like to acknowledge our and their relationships with Mother Earth, as it's an interconnected relationship, as we're all relations and have an obligation to respect that this land has nourished and healed, protected and embraced us. And we're grateful to the Indigenous peoples that have been stewards of this interconnected relationship. We're all relations, and as such, we all respect each other and our beliefs, but also our own individual relationships with Mother Earth. And so again, from my heart and spirit to yours. So for today's conversation, we're hosting an esteemed number of panelists that will provide a limited number of Indigenous-led infrastructure projects and how the concept of a Northern Infrastructure Corridor could be a benefit to moving forward to a way to connect Canada together. It is important to note that the C2C2C Unity Foundation remains supportive of Indigenous-led projects that make sense to the communities and equitably represent the interests of Indigenous communities and Canada, and also meaningfully contribute to the economy. Matt, if you can put up the first map there, that would be great. And so today we're going to showcase 4 projects. So we have the Alaska to Alberta Railway and the Eagle Spirit Energy Corridor, both proposing routes between the Pacific Ocean and Alberta. The North Atlantic Ocean is connected to the Prairie Provinces by the Hudson Bay Port of Churchill and the Hudson Bay Railway, and the Grays Bay Port and Road Project, connecting with the Northwest Passage in the Arctic. So we have a number of folks that are going to talk to these projects today. We are set to speak with you for about an hour here, and I know we had a little bit of a late start, but each speaker has about 10 minutes to speak. We're joined today by JP Gladu. He's the president of the Alaska to Alberta Railway Development Corporation, Chief Development and Relations Officer of Steel River Group. And it's my pleasure to welcome him to speak. And I'll give the other introductions prior to the speakers joining us. So the floor is yours, JP. You can take down the map as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica, for the great opening and the land acknowledgement, and really appreciate your spirit. Thank you so much. And to everybody online, it's always an interesting time when you can't see your audience or you can't judge how people are feeling. I'm actually, yes, I am the president of A2A Rail, and I'm also from Northern Ontario. I'm an Anishinaabe from the Thunder Bay area, Bingwiniashi Anishinaabe. And I'm also spent time on board work, 3 boards currently. I'm the chair of the Mikisew Group of Companies. I'm actually in Fort McMurray today and heading up to high level later this afternoon. So spending a lot of time during these crazy times on the road, but I can't wait to get back home because things, as we all know, are getting a little bit challenging, but still remain healthy. So thank you all for participating. Actually, crazy story for me. I was leaving I used to be the president and CEO for the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business, and March came along and I was heading up to Fort McMurray to be the CEO of the Boucher Group, and I lost my job before I even started. So I was looking for that next opportunity, or at least I was sort of licking my wounds. And then the founder, Sean McCaution of A2A Rail, asked me if I would lead the Canadian portion of the project. And what excited me about this project is that it is being Indigenous led in the sense that we've got some really great folks at the table. Actually, you've got Sheree Brandt, who's on my team here. She's an Indigenous lawyer helping with the commercial aspect of the project, and myself and a few other Indigenous folks and some really great Northerners who are helping support this project. But why I said yes to this project, because Sean's vision is to ensure that this project is owned 49%, up to 49% of the Canadian side equity of this project with all the 25 communities along the line. The other amazing thing about this project is that we actually haven't triggered any regulatory work at this point, because we need to ensure that our Indigenous communities are supportive of this project before we start to launch into any regulatory work. And I think folks that are listening in, as well as my fellow panelists, fully appreciate that without Indigenous support, it's very difficult to get anything built. And it's the right thing to do. Our people have been on this land for generations and generations and generations, thousands of years. You know, the tides are turning in Canada, and you start to see deals done like the East Tank project or the Clearwater project, Clearwater deal done in the East Coast. Indigenous communities are hungry for equity, hungry for participation, real participation in projects. So I said yes to this project, and it's been since June. We did receive the presidential permit from President Trump back in the end of September for the cross-border permit heading into Alaska. The Biden administration is also incredibly supportive of this project, which we're also grateful for. So we do have the support, and we'll continue to carry this work forward. The work, as you all know, is challenging when you've got a number of communities on linear projects. And so I'm really excited to listen to my fellow panelists to see where their work is carrying them to date. We've been doing as many community visits as we possibly can, at least mostly on Zoom these days. And there's been a lot of great support for this project because the communities see the opportunity in the equity portion of the project, as well as making sure that we do the work together to make sure that as many Indigenous entrepreneurs and people that are looking for the work to support their families and their communities are involved in this project as possible. But what also excites me about this project is that because we haven't put any lines set in stone, there's a 10-kilometer right of way sort of that we've flown and that we proposed with communities. And this project is going to be successful because of the Indigenous engagement. We're looking for the communities to help guide the way that this line gets developed and actually put in stone with community participation, so we can move in and out of that corridor. And the other thing is that we've already been having some conversations with the community around the projection of the line going through a sensitive area culturally for their community, and we absolutely respect that the community's perspective and the need to ensure that the area is protected. So we will make the necessary changes to make sure that this project avoids those areas that are important to community. The other thing that we've been very forthright in is that on the up to 49% equity, there are, communities, we're not expecting communities to write checks. We encourage communities to come in commercial terms as soon as we can, so we can be partners. And I don't know if folks know who David Sharp is. He's a Mohawk guy and a real fantastic guy, raised a lot of capital for all sorts of infrastructure for Indigenous communities. And we've got significant resources set aside to support community equity participation in this project. So it's there for communities to access, and we continue to communicate with the communities on a regular basis. It's challenging because in Alberta, there's a longer history of other than the Mackenzie gas line, which didn't come to fruition, of communities coming together on linear projects, whether that be the recent ATCO project or pipelines. And so there's a level of sophistication which I think is just runs a little bit deeper in Alberta due to past experience. And the Northwest Territories and the Yukon communities, of course, are also hungry for opportunity, but the approach, of course, is a little bit different in each region as well as between communities. So we need to be sensitive to those nuances. So I don't want to take up too much more time. I see Calvin's also joined. That's fantastic. And I want to, look forward to the questions coming forward, and also listening to my fellow panelists. So thank you for the opportunity. Rich.
Thank you so much, JP, for those great words that you have on the projects that you're proceeding with. And for those watching and attending, you can type your questions into the chat, and we'll have some time for questions towards the end of the discussion here. I'd like to invite the next panelist to come and speak. So it's my pleasure to introduce Calvin Hyland. He's the president and board chair of Eagle Spirit Energy Corridor, president and CEO of Eagle Group of Companies, a best-selling author, lawyer, and president of the Native Investment and Trade Association. Calvin, are you there to turn on your camera and join in?
Mute.
There,
How's that?
perfect. That's much better. The floor is yours. You have 10 minutes, please, Calvin, to share your thoughts.
Okay. I'd like to thank you for this invitation. It's regrettable that I'm a bit of a techno idiot here trying to get onto this whole thing, and like to extend a warm welcome to everybody that's attending, and my fellow panelists for taking their time in doing this. It's been very difficult during this period of COVID, but to get to my presentation, 9 years ago, we started a project, Eagle Spirit Energy, and it originally started out as an idea of building an oil pipeline from the Fort McMurray area to the BC coast. And the whole project was based on the prerequisite that it would not proceed forward without Indigenous support. So we went out, we met with Indigenous people for a long period of consultation, and we got support of all of the groups along the route. In the meantime, several things changed. The first thing that changed was that the federal government kept moving the goalpost and putting obstacles in the way of projects like ours. And in reviewing what our plans were, we thought it would be much more sensible to take a corridor approach to what we were doing, because the amount of effort that goes into getting Indigenous support for just one project would probably be better spent if it could be done for a corridor project. And so we expanded our idea from one crude oil pipeline to 4 pipelines, two LNG NGL pipelines, 5.8 billion cubic feet per day each, and 2 million barrel per day partially upgraded bitumen pipelines. And looking at the infrastructure that was needed for this, particularly the power, we developed a plan that we feel is one of the greenest ideas for a project like this in the world. And so we've been developing it and basically been working our way to meeting some financial milestones. And the way we think about this is it's kind of like the Western St. Lawrence Seaway. In Eastern Canada, the St. Lawrence Seaway opened up, large parts of Ontario and Quebec for industry and business, and so that's the way we thought of this. A project like this would create huge number of jobs and revenue. The natural resources industry is incredibly important to the economy of Canada, and unfortunately, we seem to have a federal government that's completely hostile to any natural resource development. But those are just obstacles to be overcome. We're continuing to work on this, and we had run into the obstacle of the federal government passing the bill that basically prohibited oil tankers from landing on the BC coast. And we had made arrangements to acquire a port just across the border in Alaska. And so we were proceeding along that route. We thought it wasn't prudent to seek a presidential approval for what we were doing prior to the election, because we didn't know which way it was going to go. And so that's another factor in the mix, I guess, if we're forced with our oil pipeline to go to Alaska. And we have a very, very detailed engineered environmental plan. In a lot of senses, what these environmentalists are doing with the energy industry is they're making us ship our oil and our gas huge long distances in pipelines or by rail down to the Gulf Coast, and for every 1,000 kilometers of pipeline, I think the number is it increases the CO2 burn by about 5%. And so with the shortest route, with alternative energy to absolutely reduce greenhouse gases, and for pipelines, our idea was that we would be able to start up our corridor with an LNG NGL pipeline that would take gas directly out of BC to a port on the coast, either in BC or in Alaska. So that's pretty much a summary of what we're doing.
Thanks so much for that, Calvin. It's great to hear from both JP as well as yourself around projects that are happening on the west side of the northern part of Canada. So our next panelist is going to speak a little bit closer to the Hudson Bay, and so it's my pleasure to introduce Mike Spence. He is the mayor of Churchill, Manitoba, and co-chair of One North, which is made up of regional Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities that are 50% owners of the Arctic Gateway Group's Hudson Bay Railway and Port of Churchill. So the floor is yours, Mike, and you have, again, 10 minutes to share with us your thoughts.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this presentation, Sea to Sea to Sea. It's a privilege to be here. What I want to talk about naturally is the northern Manitoba infrastructure that we have. The key transportation assets in our Churchill corridor are owned by One North and the Arctic Gateway Group. These assets are a little in a different position than the other projects we're reviewing today. They're already built and in operation. Our existing corridor consists of the Hudson Bay Railway, the Port of Churchill, the Churchill Grain Tank Farm, and also adjacent to that is a 9,200-foot paved airport runway. These assets, if we were to build them today, they would cost millions of dollars. We are very proud to have a broad Indigenous ownership and are pleased to have enjoyed the support of our federal government. However, in saying that, we face serious challenges in realizing the tremendous potential of being Canada's only rail accessible deep water seaport. We all know that climate change is before us. Climate change is not waiting for COVID to be brought under control. So, we have revealed potential opportunities and utility outstanding variabilities in Canada's north if immediate and determined action is taken now. Just some background on the Hudson Bay Railway. It was completed into Churchill in 1929, and just following that, the Port of Churchill was completed in 1931. These were assets that were built by the government of Canada, and as it was to provide exporting grain, abundance of grain from the catchment area of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, into Churchill. Over that time, CNR operated the rail line, and Canada operated the port operations under Ports Canada. In 1997, the government of Canada sold the port and rail line to Matrax of Denver. There was some early years of success, and then after that, there was a sharp decline in traffic and no reinvestment in the line and corridor. And we felt that as northern communities who relied on that. Grain shipments have formed an even mainstay of the corridor for over the years. And we all know the Canadian Seaport controls grain exports through the Port of Churchill. We're shipping approximately 400 to 500 on the average 1,000 tons of grain through the Port of Churchill. Imports, however, have been limited over the past number of years, but we did see several international shippings arriving at the port in the past number of years. In addition to export shipments, the rail line is also a lifeline to the local communities and First Nations along its route for both freight through the Hudson Bay Rail Line and passenger service, via rail passenger service. Some of the communities and First Nations have no other year-round surface link. Like I said, it's a lifeline. Churchill is actually the northern link of the rail line to the communities. We rely on rail to bring thousands of tourists each year for polar bear viewing, bird watching, northern lights, beluga whale watching, and to also supply goods for our homes and businesses, and to transport us to facilities, friends, family to northern Manitoba. And it's our highway to the north, so to speak. We also resupply the Kivlik district of Nunavut. So the products are moving up the rail line to Churchill and then barge to some of the communities like Rankin Inlet, Barbiet, Baker Lake. So over the past 30 years, much of the Kivlik resupply shifted to St. Lawrence, largely due to reliance on the Quebec-based mining companies and Quebec mining companies develop projects in Nunavut. These companies also leverage their existing suppliers' networks. With the demise of the wheat board between 2012 and 2015, our grain exports slumped. As a result, the owners saw revenues fall and seemed to lose interest in operating and maintaining these assets. In 2016, Omnitrax canceled the grain season, facing shippers to make last-minute changes to their exporting routes and surrounding, in one case, a boatload of wheat at the port. Omnitrax announced that the business was up for sale. And that same year, we had a record spring flood that caused 22 washouts and shut down a rail line between Gillam and Churchill for 18 months. It was clear that the region needed to take control of its legs, to provide the opportunities that lay ahead. So in working with the Indigenous Christian Sinclair of the Pasqua Cree Nation, the PAW, we created One North. It's a membership that's made up of communities and First Nation communities along the rail line. We wanted to buy the rail line port so that we could secure a future. So the importance of that was something that it didn't take long to realize. We needed to take control, which we did. In the summer of 2018, the government of Canada, that it would support the purchase by local ownership. But we needed to demonstrate a viable business model. As we all know, mayors and chiefs don't normally run ports and rail lines. So we needed a business partner who could provide the operational and administrative experience. We were introduced to our partner, Fairfax Financial, and HET Food and Ingredient Services. The Arctic Gateway Group was formed with One North and Fairfax HET, with a strong support from the federal government of $117 million. We purchased a rail line on August 31st of 2018. And we immediately started repairs to reopen the line to Churchill. And we did it in a matter of 4 months before winter set in. Last summer, 2019, we laid 80,000 rail ties were replaced. Critical culvert work and maintenance was accomplished. 4 ships were loaded at Churchill Harbor. 3 resupply ships were reestablished. Folks in the Kiblik area north of us have had a long-standing relationship with Manitoba. So we were very pleased that we can again see the annual resupply. It's not all been smooth sailing. There's still a lot to do. Transit times and costs normally pull traffic to the particular corridor. However, reliability also trumps these advantages. The market has a long memory. Past problems that scared off our customers. They need to see continuous performance before moving their traffic back to the Churchill corridor. So we have a lot of work to do to establish a good track record to a top-notch assets. Well, the Hudson Bay Rail Line, the port, have done a great job of reestablishing reliable service. We're also eliminating many slow orders on the rail, operating on time. The infrastructure still needs extensive repair and maintenance. And these improvements will get the assets to a point where annual maintenance is all that is needed. The rail line is a tricky subject. It's pretty clear that It is Canada's responsibility to fund and maintain highways and roadways. But railways are often viewed as a different private asset. So, you know, it's really critically important that we get our service to be equivalent to the highway system. We have exhausted our existing government capital contribution, and there's more work to do to bring the rail line to acceptable standards. Volumes have been slowly building, but there's yet to do to generate profits and attract private investment. So we are asking the government to finish the job of reestablishing a competitive, reliable corridor. Because existing logistics will not just roll over. Many grain companies have integrated terminal and port facilities. They won't lose that business to ship through Churchill. Rail cars that were purchased by the government of Canada are not made available. The Class 1 railways, CN and CP, would rather see long distance tolling between the east and west rather than share the rates with the Hudson Bay Rail Line. You know, Arctic Gateway, we committed to bring our employees in line with regional population of approximately 70% Indigenous hiring. We have achieved that. There's critical new jobs yet to come. We got local wage rate and via services are doing well and have rebuilt the confidence of the communities and the First Nations on the line. So we're very committed to the spin-off business opportunities with our First Nation communities. We are taking advantage of that and actively pursuing local businesses. In addition to creating employment and revenues for residents, these businesses will grow traffic for the rail, port, and build on the government's investment. We are very excited to be developing a plan to build upon our airports. We believe there's a real opportunity once again to position Churchill as a year-round hub for the Nunavut resupply communities. Leveraging this strategy will allow us to help ensure continued year-round operations for the rail, complementing the seasonal grain and northern resupply season. You know, we recognize we just can't sit back and hope the future of the business will come. We need to be part of creating and shaping that business. COVID-19 disrupted our supply lines, but we know moving forward that the more sustainable and engaged our supply chains are at the local level, the more resilient they will be. You know, we know Churchill has been known as the blueberry capital of the world and fast becoming the beluga whale capital of the world. We are supporting industrial development in the natural substantive area. As we all know, the ice is melting and polar shipping routes will be open within 25 years. Just think of that, the Hudson Bay. Free ice within 25 years, providing more advantages for our corridor. We have all heard of you know, the prospects of exporting oil through Churchill using rail or pipelines. With the ownership belonging to communities and their residents all along the route, we are determined to protect our land for the future generations and insist first and foremost that development does not harm the environment. There must be a balance where development and people environment can flourish together. We can balance these in our corridor with prosperity with success. Canada's northern landscape is seeing profound and accelerated warming at nearly 2 to 3 times the global average. We must ensure that we are putting a face on this climate emergency. Just recently, the federal government has recommitted its pledge to net zero by 2050 through the introduction of Bill C-12, Canadian Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act. This is a good step to address the scale and urgency of climate change. We need to be listening to our scientists, respecting our Indigenous rights and sovereignty, stimulating the economy, creating decent and green jobs, and making our communities safer and more resilient.
Good afternoon and good morning. On behalf of Kitikmeot Inuit Association President Stanley Annalblack, I would like to thank the organizers of C2C2C for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Patrick Duxbury, and I'm an advisor with the Kitikmeot Inuit Association, also known as the KIA. And I will speak to you today on the topic of the Grays Bay Road and Port Project, a nation-building infrastructure initiative that KIA is proponent and champion of. KIA was founded in 1976 and was given legal standing in the Nunavut Agreement as a regional Inuit association. KIA represents over 6,000 Inuit beneficiaries of the Nunavut Agreement in the Kitikmeot region, shown here in the dark red on the map. Inuit represent about 90% of the region's population. KIA's mandate is to manage Kitikmeot Inuit lands and resources, to protect and promote the social, cultural, political, environmental, and economic well-being of Kitikmeot Inuit. KIA owns and manages over 106,000 square kilometers of Inuit-owned lands with surface rights. These lands were selected during the negotiation of the Nunavut Agreement, and they are noted as the red patches of land on the map. These were largely selected for their social and cultural value to Inuit. In addition, all the green patches represent lands that include mineral rights. These were selected on the basis of their potential economic value. These lands with mineral rights were intended to help Inuit become more self-sufficient economically. However, there is no infrastructure to support their development. Consequently, the Grays Bay Road and Port Project has a major role to play in realizing the value of Inuit-owned land. I will now provide a short overview of the project. The Grays Bay Road and Port Project is an Inuit-led initiative intended to transform the economy of the Kitikmeot region and Nunavut through Inuit-owned infrastructure that supports new mining and mineral exploration activities, while also generating significant economic and social opportunities. It could be part of a new all-weather green energy corridor that stretches from Yellowknife to the Arctic coast. It could support climate change adaptation measures. It can help address security and safety challenges by providing an operations base for the Canadian Navy and Canadian Coast Guard. It also has the potential of lowering the cost of living and improving community resupply. You can see where the project is proposed to be located on this map. The project consists of a port at Grays Bay and a 230-kilometer all-season gravel road that runs south to the Jericho mine site. The Jericho mine site connects to the current winter road into the NWT. This then connects to the national highway system at Yellowknife. Initially, this would allow trucking during the winter from Yellowknife via the winter road, and it would also permit shipping into the interior from the north via the port. The Grays Bay Port would be the only deep water port on the Northwest Passage that connects seasonally to the national highway system. The port will be positioned to address risks associated with increasing traffic on the Northwest Passage. It will be capable of supporting search and rescue operations, responding to marine spills and rescue operations, and also for asserting Canadian sovereignty over Arctic waters. This is especially important because the nearest deep water port is at Nanisivik, more than 1,300 kilometers away by air and over 2,000 kilometers away by water. The port is also well placed to become a hub for community and exploration resupply. goods could be shipped by barge to or from the port once the waters were open in July. And this would be much earlier and much more beneficial than the current sea lift situation, which sees resupply ships arrive in the Kitikmeot region typically at the end of August or into early September. The government of the Northwest Territories is looking to build its own all-weather road to replace the winter road that currently resupplies the diamond mines. This sister development within the NWT definitely strengthens the business case for the Grays Bay project. The GNWT is pursuing this for similar reasons to KIA, which is to provide all-season access to support economic development. If both proponents are successful in their mission, we could see the two roads connect at some point in the future. The corridor could result in NWT hydropower also being developed and brought up to help green mining activity in this area. Ultimately, this entire corridor could become an important north-south branch of the envisioned C2C2C unity corridor. So why is KI putting so much effort into this project? And why has it become its proponent? KI has become champion of the Grays Bay Road and Port project because it has the potential to transform the economy of the Kitikmeot region through the creation of jobs, business opportunities, and generation of wealth for its residents. The Grays Bay project also helps to fulfill the vision that Inuit had when they negotiated the Nunavut Agreement. The Inuit negotiators at that time selected lands with subsurface rights because of their mineral and royalty potential, which in turn would promote economic self-sufficiency. However, the resource potential of Nunavut and the Kitikmeot region in particular can only happen with infrastructure that provides lower cost access to Inuit-owned lands in the interior. At the heart of it is the ability of the Grays Bay project to open up major mineral development opportunities into the Slave Geologic Province. The Slave Geological Province is a mineral-rich region that hosts some of the most attractive but underexplored opportunities in Canada. However, despite the potential known ore bodies and known reserves, they remain both underexplored and undeveloped because of the high cost of access. And even if they are well explored, the lack of transportation infrastructure creates a significant bottleneck for investment and development. So I'm going to wrap up my presentation by talking about the current status and anticipated timelines for the Grays Bay Road and Port project. KI's current focus is to get the Grays Bay project permitted. This will de-risk the project and it also opens the door for potential future investments. The first step in the permitting is the successful completion of the environmental assessment, which has already been initiated. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic has temporarily halted permitting activities, and we hope to resume in 2021 once things begin to settle and travel is more easy. In 2019, Transport Canada contributed $21.5 million in funding for permitting activities. And KI is extremely grateful to Transport Canada for the support that it's provided to date. In addition, Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated, which is KI's umbrella organization, recently approved an interest-free loan of $7.25 million, which will help to cover the portion of the pre-development costs not covered by Transport Canada's grant. KI is also very fortunate to have acquired significant amounts of design and environmental data from industry stakeholders operating in the region. This has helped accelerate permitting. So as KI moves forward with the permitting activities, it will also make efforts to strengthen the business case and navigate a path towards construction funding. On the issue of capital and construction costs, the current project cost, including contingencies, is estimated at over $550 million. And these are the 2018 estimates, which will have to be revisited in coming years. We believe that perhaps 25 to 35% of the capital costs of construction could be secured through third-party debt that would be paid back by commercial users of the road and port. So this would include tolls and port fees. However, significant federal government funding is likely the key path to realize the project. KI hopes that the nation building projects that include Grace Bay Road and Port will attract the imagination and support of Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Kwana Koyanimik, merci. Thank you very much.
We'll do one last question here. That's a general question. And then we'll go through all the speakers to give your thoughts on it. And again, thank you for everyone for joining in. The general question that has been asked is, do you find Indigenous communities are more positive or negative towards new infrastructure development? And I know a lot of these initiatives are Indigenous led. So I know, as well as I know that for a lot of projects, often there's a lot of controversy around it. So this is a very good question that the folks are curious about. So again, do you find Indigenous communities are more positive or negative towards new infrastructure development? So JP, we'll start with you.
Sure, appreciate it. Get this often in natural resource development, et cetera. Communities, I think, largely are not opposed to resource development or infrastructure development. We are opposed to the way they've been done in the past, where it does not have our people involved, benefiting, monitoring, having our people on the ground. Long gone are the days that proponents will come in and develop without our meaningful participation, as well as the benefits that accrue from these types of activities. Our communities need to unlock the potential in our territories, and we need to do that in a respectful way that's also environmentally, we mitigate as many impacts as we can with the best technology. We need a voice, and we need to generate economies for our people. So largely, I think communities are pretty supportive of this project, of a lot of resource projects and transportation projects, infrastructure projects. Just a really quick note on the LNG project. 20 First Nations were supportive of that project. One segment of one community had some challenges with hereditary chiefs and their governance systems, and they just needed a bit more time to sort that out. I don't think that was anybody else's place but that community's to figure out. But at the same time, there were 20 First Nations that wanted that project, and it's we're progressing on that, and I think that's a great thing. So, I mean, that's one signal about the overall support for projects, even in gas and oil. So.
Thanks for that, JP. And definitely the impact of media in infrastructure projects is definitely one that is a challenge that everyone has to deal with too. So Calvin, same question to you. Do you find Indigenous communities are more positive or negative towards new infrastructure developments?
Thank you. Well, I'm just about finished my 5th book. It's called Rise of Indigenous Nations, Poverty to Power. It's been 10 years in the writing, and a surprise topic that's come up in my book has been the whole point of the book is to discuss why having an independent revenue source is absolutely critical. I mean, in this times of peace, money is power, and Indigenous people need to have it in order to take their power back. But one of the issues that's come up in most northern communities, the unemployment rate is over 90%. When you consider that in the context of the Great Depression in the U.S., which was about 25% when people were jumping out of buildings and so on, it's absolutely horrendous. And in considering projects, First Nations are absolutely first and foremost concerned about the environment. And what we found is that what I've termed the eco-colonialists, these big NGOs come into communities, and they basically use tactics that are, in my mind, similar to CIA or FSB destabilization projects in banana republics, and they alarm the people with information that's not correct, and they create polarization. They create quite a lot of division in communities, And when you analyze what their business plan is, their business plan is just like every other entity. They're trying to make as much money as they can for themselves as possible and to employ their ideology. And in the process, Indigenous people are used as their whipping dogs, unfortunately. And I think this kind of eco-colonialism needs to be recognized because it's not serving Indigenous people at all. I think Nellie Cornier said a long time ago when the natural gas pipeline was halted by Southern environmental organizations, the Indigenous people of the Northwest Territory were astounded that they would be given so much weight when the interests of the actual people who were living with the project from an economic and social point of view is completely disregarded. So I think Indigenous people are open to development as long as they're satisfied that it meets their environmental standards. And why should large international environmental groups be calling the shots in the traditional territories of people who've lived there for 14,000 years? So that's my
Thank
comment.
you. Thank you so much, Kelvin. And those are definitely excellent points. Mike, same question to you. Do you find Indigenous communities are more positive or negative towards new infrastructure development?
I think absolutely positive. You know, it's keeping in mind the environment is critically important as we move forward. But you know, everybody wants, we all want our quality of life and economic independence, you know. And like I stated, like, you know, the Omnitracks of the world and the CNs before that, the government of Canada was owning the infrastructure, and we were just being employees of that. But over time, you realize that, you know, the suitcases believe in the community, the suitcases full of money. Well, you know what? It's time that northern communities, First Nation communities, you know, start building our nations. So there's a great opportunity for, you know, so that we can all live comfortable, continue to have ownership in infrastructure that services our needs. You know, there are many, many opportunities, and I think far too long, you know, we were the employees, but now we'll be employing our local people, and we'll be continuing to reinvest in the importance of making sure that, keeping in mind our wildlife and environment is protected. You know, it's an opportunity that we see before us, and we are good stewards of the land and doing that as well.
Thanks so much, Mike, for your comments. And Patrick, last but not least, same question to you. Do you find Indigenous communities are more positive or negative towards infrastructure development?
Okay, well, I'll put the caveat that I lack the broad experience of, say, JP or Calvin. Who have much more of a nationwide view of things. I can just speak largely about this project, the Grays Bay project. So the basis of the support, I mean, obviously starts from the fact that, you know, it's KIA, it's their democratically elected leadership. And, you know, like Stanley Anablack, who was elected a couple of years back, is being a champion of this project. And, you know, the fact that he was reelected, I guess, speaks to a desire that a lot of his membership wants to see this project through, because this was something that he campaigned on. More broadly speaking, at the community level, and, you know, his experience going into community engagement sessions and speaking with people, I think, you know, they have, you know, a very realistic view of what needs to be done in order to have an economy. And you can look at the Kitikmeot, it's extremely isolated. There is virtually no infrastructure. There's no like regional infrastructure that supports economic development. So they have very, very few opportunities. There's one mine, and right now
that's in operation, and it's in a tenuous situation currently, partly because of its isolation and lack of infrastructure being one of the factors there. So there are very few options to pivot to, in lieu of, either one mine in your backyard, and otherwise it's sort of like, government transfers, and, it's those are your options. So projects such as the Grays Bay Road and Port Project, which would purport to create new opportunities because it actually opens up the chances for new mines, new mineral opportunities, other forms of economic activity, a port, so those things, I think, whereas people have to see the value in a specific sort of aspect of the project. Some of them may not be that enthusiastic about what it, that it lowers the cost for the mining industry, but they might say, well, it'd be nice for my kids to get a job at that mine, or even more like it'd be nice to get cheaper groceries, or be able to ship up a truck with a $2,000 shipping cost rather than $8,000 shipping cost. Those sorts of things which play into it. And of course, yeah, there are people who will reject it outhand because they have, I think, environmental concerns. Some of them are very legitimate, and unfortunately, as Calvin noted too, possibly some of them are sort of antagonized by outside actors. That happens as well. So, sorry, it's a bit of a rambling response to a very pointed question, but there you go. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Patrick, and thanks for everyone for joining in today. And my sincere thanks on behalf of the C2C2C Unity Foundation to our panelists for joining us today. Again, my name is Jessica Vandenberg, and we were happy to host you today to hear about 4 Indigenous-led infrastructure projects that could be potentially part of the prospective Northern Canadian Infrastructure Corridor. I'd also once again like to thank our premier partner, Branch Group of Companies, for their sponsorship, and remind you that our next C2C2C webinar will be hosted on February 25th, and we'll take a closer look at the prospects for a National Corridor Authority and what that might accomplish. And for those who didn't get your questions answered today, we will be sure to follow up with you. So thanks again, and have a wonderful day, and I hope you stay safe and healthy.